Welcome back. Today I have a little bit of a treat for you all. If you are not following me over on Instagram, firstly I'm going to need you to rectify that ASAP and go and head over. My username is @BethanE, exactly the same as my YouTube channel. But I recently did a live with the fabulous Latasha James, who creates content for social media managers and freelancers, as well as creators, and helping them grow their businesses, be more efficient, find really new cool softwares and social media updates, literally all the stuff. But we hopped on a live to talk about social media management versus agency. Latasha was the very first mentor I ever worked with in my business when I was still side hustling. And since then, we've kind of maintained a relationship as my agency has grown. I've even featured a little bit in her social media management academy. I was even featured in the lesson about agencies in the social media management accelerator. So when I wanted to have this conversation, I knew no one better. Latasha's run an agency herself, but she works with social media managers every single day. So that's enough for me. I'm gonna cut it there. I just want to give you one warning. This is a replay of an Instagram live, so the quality isn't fantastic. We're making do with what we can here, but I still wanted to upload it because I didn't want you to miss out if you didn't see the live. Anyway, I'm gonna hand over to my past self, and I hope that you enjoy.
Hello.
We got this.
I'm the worst at Instagram, so I was like, is this my fault? I don't know.
No, I think it's honestly Instagram's fault.
Yeah.
Most of the time when stuff goes wrong, it's because there's, a glitch or 8.
Yeah. Yes, I know how it is.
How are you doing?
I'm good. Yeah, I heard somebody in the other one saying they're in Ohio. It's 9 a.m. It's same here. So 9 a.m. here, beginning of the day. So good.
Yeah, 9 p.m. here, the end of the day, just finishing up. So we literally couldn't be on more opposite.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, I can see people flooding in. So firstly, thank you everybody for joining. Latasha, I'm sure everyone knows you that's here, but just in case, could you introduce yourself?
Yeah, I'm a content creator. I create YouTube videos, podcasts, all about freelancing. So you can find me Freelance Friday Podcast. I'm on YouTube. I worked in kind of every different aspect of the social media marketing world. I've done, nonprofit work. I worked at a few different Fortune 500 companies in the corporate world. And then I transitioned over to being a full-time freelancer for a while, built that company up, worked kind of in an agency model for a while, and also created content along the way. So kind of done a little bit of everything. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of similar. So I started out in third sector marketing, so with and all this sort of stuff. And now I run my own agency, have done for the last 6 years, but started out as a freelancer like most people do. So yeah, I relate. I feel like I've seen so many different sides of the social media world.
Yeah.
And the only one that I haven't is the kind of creator space. So that's always really interesting to hear your insight on that too.
I mean, you're a creator too, though. You create content. Yeah, you know the space for sure.
Okay, cool. Well, yeah. I mean, maybe not so much the technical, the brand deals, the business that I'm creating. I do it for the boost to my business and all of that side of stuff. So yeah. I do make lots of content.
Yeah.
But I wanted today to talk a little bit about the kind of social media management space, but also the agency space, both of us coming from having done both. And I know a lot of your audience are social media managers, same. A lot of mine are as well. So I just thought it'd be something that the people who know us both would be interested to hear us talk about.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. So I've got a couple of questions here for Latasha. I can see there's questions flooding in on the chat as well. So I guess we'll come back to those if we get shot to. But yeah, let's kick things off with, I'm always talking about booked and busy social media managers. Yeah. So I would love to know, what would you consider a booked and busy social media manager?
Yeah, this is $1 million question. I get this all the time. And I mean, the answer is it really does depend. It depends on how complex the project is. Are you just doing social media strategy, or are you doing 5 different platforms, full service, everyday posts? Are you doing copywriting for those daily posts, or are you doing full content creation, publishing, management? So it really does depend. But I would say when I was a solo freelancer, I didn't have any help. If I was doing kind of my version of full service at that point, which was maybe a platform or two, a couple of platforms, 3 posts a week minimum.
Yeah.
I would say that I felt really, really busy at like 4 to 5 clients. Like I was kind of ripping my hair out around that number.
Yeah.
So I could do it, but anything more than that is just, for me, it was way too much.
I agree. I usually say, like, I don't know how people do more than 5 with like, and be able to sustain long term, be able to sustain like the energy, but also burnout and all the other stuff that comes into play as a business owner. Yeah. But I don't know that we're in the majority of that. I think a lot of people look at how many clients they can take on, they're aiming for like 10, 15.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was just on a podcast interview last week or earlier this week, and I was explaining, like, because he was asking me, how do I do it all? Like, how do you create content and do all? Yeah. And my answer is, I don't take on that many clients. And I feel like there's kind of like this weird stigma about that. Like, oh, you're not a real business owner or something like that, or you're not really doing it. But like, I charge a premium rate to work with me and only work with a few clients a year, to be honest, a handful of clients at a time. And so I think people can do whatever they want. Obviously, if you're playing the volume game, I think that's absolutely, there's a way to do that. But I think you can be a lot more successful if you just raise your rates a little bit and just playing around with that math and seeing, if you charge a couple $100 extra, how much more that means to you, the individual. And for a business who's paying you, like, that's usually not a significant enough increase to really make them not want to work with you. So I think taking on less volume, higher rate, higher ticket is the way to go. For me, at least. Yeah.
I mean, I do think people struggle with that, though. This is a whole other conversation that we can't really get into today. But like, the idea of how do people break into high ticket? How do you start charging that premium for your service is something that I think it comes down to, but that's where a lot of the issue is, right? People want the 10K month, and they have clients that don't pay a huge amount, so they're aiming for the kind of 10 to 15 clients to make that happen. But once you can change up and become the high ticket version of your own services, it does make a big difference, and you can mentally be a lot more present. And like, I don't know, almost the energy, the excitement that you can have for each client feels a lot more than if you were to take on like 15 to 20. You're like, who are they again? Wait, what?
For sure. It loses some of that human touch, I think, if you're treating it like a factory, like a factory line, and all your clients are just another number. Having that personal connection, I think, really makes a big difference.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so the next question that I had was, I think then on that note, on that idea of people becoming booked and busy, and how many clients they can take on, and all of these sorts of conversations, I seem to see a lot of interest in people moving into the agency space and becoming an agency owner. I feel like it's almost the natural evolution for a lot of social media managers. And I want to ask you, why do you think there is such an interest in social media managers becoming an agency owner?
Yeah, well, I think to your last question, I think that those are kind of the options for scaling. You can either, like, there's really 2 options. You can charge higher rates and work with less clients, or you can serve more clients. And if you want to not lose your mind, chances are you need help. Like, if you want to scale beyond that 4, 5, 6 clients, you're going to need help in some way. And so I think the other thing about agency work that, I don't know, first of all, I'm curious your take on this too, because I think people define agency very differently, number one. But, I think my perspective on an agency is that there are multiple people involved in the company who have different areas of expertise, whether that's platform, like you have a Pinterest manager or an Instagram manager, or it's discipline, so copywriting, creation, ads, whatever. And so I think that's the other huge benefit of it, is we cannot all do it all. Like, I don't care who you are. That's kind of why I don't love the term like social media expert when people say that about me. Like, it's fine if they want to say that, but like, I don't know I'm still learning TikTok. Clearly, I don't even know how to use Instagram Live half the time. So like, we can't all be experts at every single feature platform. So I think that's another huge benefit. I might not be a TikTok expert, but I have a ton of them in my network. I have a ton of them who can collaborate on projects with me. And so to me, that's one of the huge benefits as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know what? I think I class agency in my brain. It's when you have people that are like working on the project and people managing the project. Like you have an account manager and you have the people who are running the day to day, like people, the content writers or the copywriter, the social media manager. But I mean, I don't disagree. I think having different departments and different lines inside of an agency is a really common structure as well. But yeah, it definitely is, like, you hear people talk about agency when they're still starting out, and it's just one of them because that's where they want to be in the future. And like, there's lots of different ways that people refer to agency.
For sure.
Wait, you said something earlier that I was like, oh, I have to come back to this for the second question. You were talking about when people don't want less clients because you think it doesn't make them like a proper business owner in their eyes. I truly think that's a big part of why people have a want to become an agency owner as well. I think a lot of people feel like, oh, well, if I have staff and if I have like all these clients, then I'm going to be like a real business owner.
Yeah, that's a good point. For sure. Yeah, I think there's a book that I really enjoy. It's called The Minimalist Entrepreneur by Sahil Lavinia. He's the founder of Gumroad. He worked at Pinterest. And it's a good one to read if you're kind of in that mindset of like, you know, I feel like I need the big flashy office. I feel like I need the staff of, you know, that is valid. Like if you really want that, if that's what you dreamed of, if that makes sense, absolutely go for it. But I think like a lot of people don't need that. You know, a lot of people can work by themselves or maybe work with a couple of freelancers here or there, and you can do really, really well. I mean, I think people are really shocked to hear today in my business, I'm the only full-time team member in my business. And that's for everything. Like, I don't have a video editor. I do everything and I like everything. And like, it's possible to do really, really well in the business, you know, that way. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I've actually scaled my business back since we last spoke, actually. Like I had a team of 5 in an agency, like that was a big focus. And since then I do a lot more coaching these days. I still have an agency and still love it and still have some team members that I work with, but not 5. And it honestly just makes my life easier. Like I'm able to take on more with less people around because less of my time is on managing my team. I can put more time back into the business, right? Like it evens itself out.
For sure. Well, here's the other thing too, that I don't think a lot of people talk about when we talk about social media agencies is it's also more liability now. It's more responsibility. And, you know, it can look really cool to have like this big fancy office with a team of 20 people and all of this. But I want to know, and even your revenue might look really good because you're able to do more. But I want to know what it really, like, I want to see that profit and loss statement because I don't spend a lot of money in my business. Like I'm super profitable, and that is really good because when things change in the world, if I do lose a client, if I do just want to, like, I'm taking December off, like I'm done. Like I don't need this, you know, huge need. There's not this huge need for cash flow of like, I need to be making, you know, $100,000 this month to keep the lights on in my business. I don't have that pressure. So it comes, you know, there's pros and cons to both sides for sure, but you have to know what you're getting into for sure.
Yeah, no, I that's a really good point because it is, there's not just staff costs. I think everybody knows about that. Of course, you're going to have to pay for the staff that you hire, but there's even things like benefits, like private health insurance was something that we invested in for our team that like starts to add it in. Obviously in the UK it's very different, but like there was little perks that we started adding, like the Christmas parties, and the more staff you have, the more of a like a real employer. Like as much as we were saying you have to be a real business owner, when you want to be an agency, a lot of people are doing it because of that comes with all the negatives of it, of like there's a lot more paperwork, there's a lot more HR. I had to like dish out to do a leadership and management course because I did not know what I was doing in terms of managing people. That was very expensive to pay for.
For sure. And that's another whole thing is all of the like legal stuff, all of the paperwork stuff that goes into it. Again, I'm not discouraging people from doing it, but it's not just as simple as like maybe, sometimes a TikTok might make a look, just like hire 20 people and call it a day. There's a lot more to it.
Yeah. And I mean, it kind of, we're already talking about it. The next question was going to be about the pros and cons.
Yeah.
And I think for me, one of the biggest pros is that I felt so much more in control as a agency owner than I did a social media manager, because I was in a very different position when I met my clients. Like, I was no longer this one person band who was like, and it was always I'm gonna just manage your social media. Like, I was coming as an agency owner that was gonna oversee the project, and like there was a very different vibe of that. And I got to kind of just stick to the strategic stuff and let the team take care of the more day-to-day side. And I loved that part of it. Is just my favorite bit. So I wonder what your perspective of the pros of an agency is.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest, well, there's a few. Number one, that area of expertise, like I said. So being able to say, hey, like, yes, I can help you. I can help most people when I have a team, because chances are somebody on the team has experience with that industry or has experience with that platform or is excited about that client, even if I personally, am not the best fit. So it definitely widens your scope, if you will, and widens the number of clients that you're able to take on and the types of clients that you're able to take on, which is great. I think the other big thing, I think it's kind of similar to what you said, is like, sometimes people are surprised to hear this, but like, I don't love being the face of my brand. It kind of just happened, And again, that comes with a lot of pressure, a lot of responsibility, a lot of like emotional stuff that goes on of like, where does the person end and the business owner begin, So it can be really challenging. And I'm very grateful for, I'm not trying to be like, oh my gosh, my life is so hard, but like, it is.
I get it.
Yeah, it's a lot of pressure. So it's really nice to have an agency brand to be able to build and have other faces that maybe can pop up on camera if you need to, or to the client management stuff even. I think I don't struggle so much with this anymore, but it's taken me years to get to this point of being really comfortable with boundaries and onboarding and all of that. But like, sometimes when people are hiring just a solo, I don't want to say just, but when people are hiring a solo freelancer, it's like we're their best friend, and that line of the professionalism kind of isn't really there. So it's like the text late at night or the, just not super professional stuff happens sometimes. So that is huge pro of an agency, I think, is being able to have that sort of entity behind you.
Yeah. Yeah, I really agree with that. The boundaries thing is something that I probably wouldn't have considered, but you're right. Like, there were certain clients that even when I worked with them when I was a freelancer, and then I turned into an agency owner, and it was like all of a sudden the really weird phone calls to be like, oh, I didn't see Sue's daughter's first day at school, why is this? Like, those random questions that you would get that like, okay, well, that's not really what I'm helping you with. They just stopped because they just would never ask that of this team member they didn't have that kind of connection with. So that's a really, really good point that I didn't think about.
Yeah, for sure. And as far as cons, I mean, I think we kind of talked about it a little bit. I think the biggest con with agency stuff is it's a big financial responsibility that I don't think a lot of people think about. I know way back on my YouTube channel, I did kind of a little workshop right before I hired my first full-time employee. And I took advice from my bookkeepers of how much money I need to be saving. And like, I tried to keep 6 months runway for the business in the bank. That's a lot of money when you factor in 2 salaries, operating expenses. And so can you do it without that? Absolutely. I know there are people who are like way more comfortable with risk, but I'm pretty risk averse. Like I like that safety, I think there's a lot of stuff that goes into that, just like how I grew up and whatnot. But like, I prefer to have money in the bank, like to know to have it for a rainy day. And so it can be really scary to be that risky or to have to, build your business up so much before taking staff on. And then I think the other side is you kind of mentioned it, like the HR stuff and the training and the leadership side. Not everybody is a leader, you know, not everybody, you can be the world's best graphic designer, social media manager, whatever, and not be a good leader. So it is a different skill. And if you haven't done it in the past, one of the reasons why I was comfortable taking on a team is because I did like retail management throughout my whole, you know, younger 20s and college and stuff. So I knew I was a good leader. I knew I was a good teacher. So I felt comfortable doing it. But even still, teaching somebody and giving somebody feedback for your own business versus pulling out the Victoria's Secret handbook and being like, hey, you broke a rule, feels very different. It feels very personal, and it still is very hard. So yeah,
and it's a big change. Like, I remember sending messages to my team being like, can I ask you to do me a favor? And like, as if they could say no. As if I wasn't their boss asking them to do something. Like, there's a lot of mindset changes and approaches that you have to do. And I've worked as a manager in my career, but it just feels, I almost can't put it into words. It just feels so different. It feels like I'm personally putting on someone else when it's for a job. There's almost like there's the big bad guy in the corner of corporate or the senior management team, like, oh, they're making me do it.
Yes, I can totally relate to that. I have had to break myself out of using that phrase too, of like, hey, can I bug you for a second? Hey, can I ask you a favor? It's like, I'm literally, and yeah, of course it's a good thing to be mindful of not being like a terrible boss, and you know, but there's a line there. So like, and I catch myself say it, and I was like, but I'm not asking, like, I'm literally just asking to do like a normal day-to-day task. This is not a favor. Like, and it is just one of those mindset shifts that I think comes into play. There was one more con that I wanted to mention, and again, I'm not saying this to dishearten anyone, because I love my agency, but I do feel like as an agency owner, you have to be grinding for new clients far more frequently. Like, you almost have to be one or two clients ahead of where you need to be, because you've got staff to pay for now. And I think a lot of people struggle with that change, because as a social media manager, you get booked and busy, you're like, books are closed, thanks very much, see you later. Whereas that's a lot harder to do as an agency. Your costs are a lot higher, people can turn around and leave, and you've got to make sure that everything is covered for you, and you're kind of bringing people in on and your pipeline is full all the time. I would definitely agree with that. And I think it's a good best practice for all freelancers and you know, independent workers to always be prospecting. I say that, but I think as a solopreneur or a, you know, whatever we call it, the not agency side, I think you can do it in a less aggressive way. Like, I think going on a podcast interview could be considered prospecting. It's more of a long game, brand building kind of prospecting. Whereas, with an agency, you better be making like cold calls, cold emails, going to networking events, like doing the hard selling a little bit more than a solo freelancer might.
And I'm going to take that moment to just plug something really quick. So I do have something called the Client Attraction Academy. It's a free course that I have out for social media managers and agency owners who want more clients, because I very much remember being in that space of like, I just need one more client, and like the struggle of exactly how do you get new clients in the door, and what's the formula, and as a marketer dealing with like, how do I market for new clients, not just for marketing success and reach and engagement and all those other wonderful things. So I can see a couple of people dropping comments. There's a link in my bio if you do want access to it. It's a free course, so you're more than welcome to go and take a little look at that. Okay, so moving on, I mean, in terms of getting back to the pros then, what was your favorite thing about running an agency specifically?
Yeah. I mean, I love learning from other people, and I love working on a team as well. I realize I really don't particularly love working by myself.
Right.
And so even now, like, like I said, most my business is mostly solo, but when I do the work that I do for clients, for marketing clients, for video clients, I'm always working on a team. I build teams. Like I don't have full-time, you know, people who are on the books, but I'm always working on a team. Definitely if I'm going on set and like shooting something,
Yeah.
it's so much fun. And yeah, I just love that environment. I think it's just really fun to be able to bounce ideas off of each other and learn from other people's expertise. Like I said, I don't know everything, and nobody does.
Yeah.
Anyone who tells you that they do is a scam artist. That's what I believe. Like you can't possibly know everything about this industry.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's my favorite part.
I love that. I would say I probably agree. I think I really enjoyed, this is a bit dark, but I really enjoyed like commiserating as well with people.
Yeah.
Like if a client was just a little bit out of line or like sent an email that annoyed me, it was nice to have someone else that you could be like, oh.
Yes.
And someone that was like on your side. Whereas when you're completely on your own, you can explain the situation to friends and family, but there's no one in it with you. So there's almost a little bit of camaraderie there that like, we're in this together, and even if there's the bad stuff, you have someone to kind of lean on with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah. And flip side then, what was your favorite thing about being a social media management freelancer?
I think it feels a lot less pressure. Again, I mean, yes, there is pressure, don't get me wrong. Being a freelancer, that's probably the biggest change from, you know, working full-time in-house to going off on your own, is there is a certain degree of pressure. But if I'm only budgeting for myself, if I'm only, you know, thinking about myself, if I'm only knowing about my own kind of restrictions and all of that, it's a lot easier to do. So I think that for sure. And also just being able to do whatever I want. Like because even working with team members, even though you are the boss, you are in charge, there were times actually when I would feel really guilty about things. Like I usually take Fridays mostly off. Like I usually do like until noon or so on Fridays. And I would feel guilty if I had a team member who was still working on Friday because they didn't get their project done or whatever. And I wasn't forcing them to necessarily, but like I still felt this weird guilt, or like if I would take a vacation, and I just felt like somebody was still kind of checking in on me, and maybe having some type of feelings about, you know, the CEO, the boss, like skipping out on work every Friday. So
I really didn't think of that. I probably because I was really lucky with my team and we were all flexible workers. So there were often times when no one was working on a Friday afternoon, like, but we were working maybe on a Wednesday evening, and like it did kind of equal itself out. And for at least a year of my agency, I was in a completely different time zone to the rest of my team. So like I was sleeping for part of the time that they were working, and I kind of adjusted to that. But for me, it's the creative aspect, because I did find I do love strategy, but when I moved into an agency owner role, I was doing a lot less of the client work naturally. And that's what I had a team for. Me writing calendars wasn't the best use of my time. I should be focusing on the growth of the business and some of the other things that we had happening. But it didn't mean I didn't get to write calendars anymore. And that was part of the reason why I'd set up my business, was to be creative and to have fun writing and making graphics and like actually managing social. And I didn't do that so much as an agency owner.
Yeah. Can I say something about on that actually?
Please.
I think kind of going back to, I mentioned this earlier, like you might be the best social media manager or designer, you know, whatever. I actually sometimes think that those folks, the people who are like really, really good, don't actually make the best agency owners. And agreed. I wouldn't say that I'm like the best in the world at anything necessarily, but like I am a creative. Like that is, I think my biggest skill is my creativity and my like that aspect of the job. And I take it really seriously. And it's because of that, it becomes really hard for me to delegate, or I have like a certain standard. Like I've been editing videos since I was 15 years old. It's over half my life. And so like, yeah, it's really hard for me to delegate that and have like good enough, you know. It's like I'll just do it myself, like I'll, you know, and so that it can be really hard to delegate when you are a super creative person like that. And I think sometimes we think the opposite. Like I said, we think, oh, I'm great at editing videos. Now it's time to scale and do more videos. But I think actually maybe if you're more on the like strategic organizational side, that actually might make the best agency owner.
Yeah.
Personally.
Yeah, that's a really good point. That like where people's, it reminds me of like the TikTok trend of like I'm the marketing girly and then the like fun emojis, or I'm the marketing girly and then the like data emojis.
Okay. Yeah.
But like, what kind of marketer are you? Like, what is your joy in the social media management role that you do now? Is it the fun creative side, and or is it, well, not that strategy and data isn't fun, but like, or is it that side? What is it that you truly enjoy?
Yeah.
And for me, like, yeah, hands down, when I think back, I did really love writing calendars, but there did become a point where like I was like, oh no, I just want to focus on this stuff and like have someone else take the calendars off my hands. So it probably does tie in that's why I lent into the agency so hard.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so what would you say to somebody who is trying to make that leap from social media manager to agency owner? What would be the number one piece of advice?
So I think starting slow, starting with like a small bet is my best advice. I, hired a virtual assistant. That was kind of my first hire for like, I don't even know, maybe 10 hours a week, 5 hours a week, something like that. Just a really small amount of hours, amount of work, just to see if I could do it, if I could delegate, see if it really helped me, to see if it enabled me to take on more clients, if they were, helping me earn more money, because that's the point. And then you can kind of increase from there. I don't recommend hiring full-time right away. Like I think we don't necessarily need to in most cases. I think there might be exceptions to that, but most of the time hiring freelancers is the way to go in the beginning. And it kind of works as like a trial period at least, or it might be fine. Like I said, I work with primarily just freelancers now, and that works really well. And I think people really like it too. Like the majority of people I talk to when I'm looking to hire, they want freelance or flexible work as well. So you can attract great talent that way too. So yeah, start small. I wouldn't recommend going off and being like, oh, I need to hire 5 full-time people, get the fancy office on day one. Like start small. If you need an office, do a co-working space with a flexible contract to start before you invest the big bucks into your own stuff.
Yeah, agreed. I also think you should write your staff and yourself job descriptions, because it's really, you'll know what you're looking for from your staff, right? Like you'll probably have their job description in your head, but do you have yours? Like, do you know what you need to be focusing on and what your job is going to be moving forward? Because it can be really tough to hand over those reins on things like content calendars and creating content. And if you don't draw a line and like make clear what is your responsibility, you might catch yourself like, oh, I'll just do this extra thing, and really not serving your agency, because what you should be focusing on is, I don't know, the getting a new client or putting in systems and like some of the more strategic organizational stuff for the business instead of the doing of the business.
Yeah. And I think job descriptions for the people you're hiring is super important too, because I made this mistake early on as well, is I just felt like I just need more hands. Like I just have too much work. I need to be able to basically have like a mini me. But the problem is you're not going to find a mini you, because everybody is a unique human. So that doesn't exist. And so I did this, and I see this all the time, is people just hire more and more and more. Oh, I just need more hands. I need more hands. But like, really, you might just need one extra pair of hands that's knows what they're doing and that isn't running around trying to follow your, brain that's moving a mile a minute at all times. So having really clearly defined roles really helps with that too.
That's a really good point. Like, you might not need a mini you. And I think every business owner has been guilty of saying like, oh, if I could just clone myself, like if I could just have another me. But I actually did a lot better when I hired admin. Like, I did not need another me. I did not need someone who was doing more marketing. We already had content writers within the team. So when I finally then hired an administrative support, I was like, oh,
Yep.
now all of this extra time has been freed up. Now we're using automation to onboard clients. So like that time is never going to be used up again in the future either. And like all this stuff that I hadn't got round to, it became clear, like a light bulb turning on, that like, oh, that would be the job of an admin assistant inside of the business. And I just hadn't thought about it because I was so focused on serving clients, getting new clients,
Yep.
serving clients, getting new clients, like on repeat.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, cool. Well, that was all the questions that I had for you today, and I thank you so much for taking the time to sit and chat with me. It's always a delight to get to see you again and catch up.
Of course. Yeah.